There are a handful of developers and producers that are essentially names that are instantly recognizable in the video game industry. Those who really need no introduction despite reviewers' desire to spout off all their achievements. To make it simple, I'm going to do just that. Peter Molyneux is here today to talk about his upcoming Kickstarter game, Project Godus. Thank you, sir, for taking the time. We do appreciate it.
Not at all. Absolute pleasure to do so, and it's a fantastic thing for a designer to talk about his latest baby and latest obsession, and mine is called Project Godus.
Absolutely. Now, just to start off, I certainly hope you don't take offense right off the bat, but I would say you're equally as famous and revered for your work as you are for talking about it. Just a lot of beautiful, conceptually high art comments and quotes that perhaps might not have been taken literally. Do you think that is an accurate representation of your work, or is that more fueled by, the media cycle searching for a story?
Well, I mean, I have to admit that I am the worst PR person in the world. And the reason I'm the worst PR person in the world is because I get so excited about what I'm doing. I'm a designer, and, every day I'm dealing with, images in my mind that I'd love to see in a game. And quite often, if I'm talking to someone, I'll be talking about features in the game and features that may be in my mind and may not make it into the game. And I think that's got me into an awful lot of trouble. Hopefully I've learned my lesson these days. And so I try and only talk about the things which I'm absolutely certain are going to be in the game, and I try and not get too excited about features.
How has that sort of affected you as a game maker, to be seen on the one hand as this amazing developer, but also as someone who perhaps you need to take everything he says with a grain of salt? Is that something you sort of embrace? Because I know a lot of the media for Godus kind of plays into that a little bit. Have you found that's something that's kind of enriched and helped you, or has it been a deficit?
Well, this is actually part of, it's a problem, and I always am a fan of talking about games very, very early, and trying to explain to people and engage people in the kind of developmental process, rather than talk about the finished product, talk about the journey to the finished product. And this is one of the fantastic opportunities that developers have nowadays with things like Kickstarter and crowdfunding, is because you can talk to people who have, pledged and given you their hard-earned money because they're excited about the prospect of what you're doing. And because you can talk to engage them very early, then hopefully, that they can be part of that development process and keep you honest and be engaged daily. So, for example, on that, what we're doing with Project Godus is to do these daily videos, which are me and another designer talking through all the things that we're implementing in the game, and then addressing people's questions on a daily basis. So if someone says, well, that's just clearly ridiculous, you're never going to be able to do that, or they see a feature that they don't feel that is going to fit, it gives us a chance to explain it before the game is released. And that is a fantastic opportunity. And what hopefully that means is that you end up with a much, much better game, because the one golden rule, the one persistent golden rule of what makes a great game is the number of times it's played. The number of times it's played and iterated, and the attention to detail through those play sessions. And of course, that's exactly what we're going to do. So what I'm hoping is that, quite rightfully, people have, said, well, you should be more realistic about what you say. And what I'm hoping is that feedback that we get in developing the game, will lead to a truly great game.
Absolutely. Now, God games are these sort of games that do give the players this overarching kind of omnipotence. In the beginning, what attracted you to this sort of idea of creating games that use those sort of mechanics? Because you've been doing it for quite some time now, and you've, in a sense, if not revolutionized, if perhaps even invented this way of gaming. So what brought you to that?
Yeah, well, the idea was, in a way, it was harking back to my childhood. I was one of those kids that always loved playing with, things like Lego and, toy soldiers. And it was, it was kind of a rethinking of that, in game form. I love the feeling. I love this feeling of there being a little world that you're interacting with, and this little world is not definitely scripted, as a lot of games are, but instead it's like a simulation, so that it looks alive. And then if you have that little world, imagine having the power of gods, the power of life and death over these little people, and imagine what that would instill in you and what that would bring out. And that, at the time when I first visited that genre, that was very, very unique, and led to a whole genre of games called God games. And since then, really, especially over the last few years, that genre has died out a bit, and it's my passion and obsession to breathe some real life into it, because I still have this amazing picture in my head of this incredible simulated world which you can interact with these people that have little personalities that you just love helping them out, or in my case, hurting them occasionally, and finding this sort of new rhythm of game. And that's especially important in today's world, because we've got these new devices now, these incredibly exciting devices, which are smartphones and tablets. And whilst there is some good games on smartphones and tablets, I think that those are fantastic devices for actually putting this kind of God game genre on. And then in addition to that, the PC, which is absolutely my favorite development machine and my favorite gaming machine, is just perfect for it. The use of the mouse and being able to touch that world is absolutely fantastic.
Well, you spoke about it there, breathing new life into this sort of genre of gaming. What is your next project all about, and how is it going to do just that?
Well, the project gives you a land, and this is called Homeworld, and you are, as a god in that land, start with a few little people, and as you clear the land for them and help them with your godly powers, they spread out, and the few little people then will settle and build houses, and those houses will spawn more little people who will spread out and have become towns, and then become cities and even metropolises. And all the time you're using your godly powers to assist and help them, and to be the sort of god that you want to be to them. Now, here's the interesting part. At any time, you can take some of those people and you can take them on. You may think of this as a crusade. It's not. It's like a mission, and that mission can be played against another human being, one of your friends, one of your Facebook friends, or it can be played against a stranger, or you can, with one of your other friends, cooperate together against another human being, or you can play in this wonderfully crafted single-player game, and all of that is accessible on PC, on smartphone, and on tablet. It doesn't matter which of these devices that you use, you can access that game at any time, at any spot. And so, as those people spread out, they give you this resource called belief, and belief enables you to cast more and more powerful god powers, and some of those god powers are truly epic. They're volcanoes and earthquakes, and they're tornadoes, and they're gifts of the gods. So you can just imagine the sort of power that you can wield in these worlds, and being able to share that with lots of other people. It's a truly exciting concept. There's nothing I can see on the mobile platform that is anything like this, and on PC there hasn't been anything like this for quite some years. And if you look at some of the visuals that we've got on our Kickstarter page, you can see it looks very, very unique.
Specific to the Kickstarter page, you make reference as Godus as sort of a reinvention or reimagining of your wildly popular product, Populous. Can you speak about that sort of game, and just why bring back that style, that real core gameplay now? What do you think really makes it work in this particular life cycle of the industry?
Well, the original idea of Populous was similar to what I just described. In other words, you had these little people, and they were very primitive back in the late 80s. But they were little people, and they spread out on the landscape and gave you power through belief. But there wasn't really any multiplayer. You could play it multiplayer, but it was, you had to get something called an RS-232 lead and a soldering iron out and connect two computers together. Mm-hmm. The beauty of now is we've got something called the cloud. And the cloud is something that, business uses, but games don't really use it. And we are going to use a cloud in an amazing and incredible way to connect all these people's worlds together. Now, we tried that technology out with an experiment called Curiosity, and using that knowledge that we've gained from Curiosity and applying it to this God game genre, it means that all these worlds that people create are all connected together. And that is a fascinating, very, very unique opportunity to play a very different style of game with, something that was invented, back in the 80s, but, needs reinvention, needs, completely thinking about from the ground up. So the idea was to go back to that original Populous and have that as a seed of inspiration, combine it with a couple of other games that I've worked on since then, one called Dungeon Keeper and one called Black and White, and come up and craft something which is really unique in today's world.
Absolutely. And again, we are talking today with Peter Molyneux on his upcoming project, Godus. Specific to Godus, can you talk about some of the key gameplay features that you're bringing to the project that will appeal to those who are unfamiliar with Populous, but still, not alienating those loyal Molyneux fans who've been playing that sort of game since 1989 sort of thing, yeah.
So the principle is that as these little people spread out, as they breed and there are more and more of them, the principle is that you are their god. You can be as kind and as nice and as generous as a god should be, and that in return they give you something called belief, and this belief is a thing that powers your god powers. Now, with that simple strategy and with that simple premise, you're able to change the land. You're able to move mountains. You're able to create valleys. You're able to sculpt rivers. You're able to spring forests. Just anything that you can imagine, any godly power that you can imagine, any miraculous event you can imagine, we're going to implement in the game. With those godly powers, you're helping your little people spread out, and if you take some of your people on these challenges, you're defeating other gods who are spreading out their people, and that's the principle of the game. What's so brilliant about it, I think, is that it can be as relaxing as you want it to be. You can spend your time just moving mountains, and creating valleys, and really take your time over something. But if you're like me, that's all very well, but sometimes I want a bit of action. So being able to take your people and going into battle, using all your godly powers and using the simple principles of the games, you're able to have these truly epic battles where it's my people versus your people, and my godly powers versus your godly powers.
Absolutely. Will those key gameplay features really push along the experience for the player, or is it being supplemented by a strong narrative? Because I think with a lot of these games, it can really go either way, because I know whenever I play the God games, I almost input your own sort of stories. Like you said before, you name the citizens, they have their own sort of lives and experiences that you create around them. What's the choices that you're thinking about making? Because obviously this is still in development, but where are you thinking on that?
So the thinking is that the center of the game is something called Homeworld, and that is where the simulation really lives. And that is where you will see that the villages that your people have created will be populated by friends from your Facebook. You may well see, a friend of yours pop up, and you may be, use your godly powers to look after them. It's very relaxing, and as you say, you can use your own imagination to place a story on that. But, and I love that relaxed simulation-based gameplay, but I need a story sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I want a challenge sometimes, and that's where you're able to take your people and go on these challenges through this story mode where you're battling against some of the historic gods. The Norse gods are going to be the gods that you face first. Things that are people like Odin and Loki, they're going to be the gods that you face, and you're going to be working through that story with your people. Each one of these challenges that you win, you'll win a reward which you can take back into your home world. And that reward can be more followers, more people for your home world, and you make that little town into a city. It could be other gifts of the gods, or it may be, huge wadges of this commodity called belief. And all of that, comes together, which means that you've got 3 styles of gameplay all working superbly together. One is you've got that relaxing simulation world of homeworld. 2, you've got multiplayer, which is, as challenging as multiplayer ever is. And 3, you've got this story-based mode.
It sounds absolutely fascinating, because I think that was perhaps some of the deficits of your previous God games, is that they either did 1 or 2 of those things really well. There either was a really strong story, or there was that individual's ability to kind of create their own. And I see, obviously, you've considered that in making a product that kind of covers all bases.
Yeah, and it's taken, it's taken a lot of mistakes in previous games that I've done. I agree with you absolutely. In the original Populous, there was no story really. It was a series of maps, and I soon got tired and bored of the repetition of that. In something like Dungeon Keeper, again, it was very level based, and then something like Black and White, because the simulation and the relaxing gameplay was built into the story, sometimes the story got in the way and the simulation got in the way. So this is where I realized that we can have all 3 together. We just need to make sure that it's at the player's choice when they do these things. And I find that, fascinating. I think people, you have to, as a designer, learn from your previous mistakes.
What drew you to the idea of using Kickstarter, this now very wildly successful funding program for the development of games, for the creation of Godus? What kind of brought you to that idea? And was it kind of like a trickle-down effect, or was it something that you decided one day, this is absolutely what we're going to do?
So it's a fascinating opportunity. It's a very scary opportunity, because you're saying to the world, here's the idea. Do you believe in it? Before you've actually got much in the way of a game, and that makes it scary. But the thing that attracted me most of all was the ability to craft a game with the input of people. One of the things that I really think is incredibly important when you're making a game is you get as much input as you possibly can. So if you pledge on Kickstarter, and even if you pledge a very small amount, you have access to what we're calling a beta or an alpha, which means that you get to play the game. Hopefully you'll be playing the game early next year, playing it, and we'll be analyzing how you play it. We'll be taking your feedback and crafting it over the months of development. Now, that, I think, is a fantastic opportunity to make a great game. Because I don't think me as a designer or us as programmers and artists have the secret sauce to make a great game. A great game is made by people who play it.
Well, yeah, you talk about it right there. The idea of Kickstarter and its involvement for the fans to really be in the development cycle, in talking to a lot of the other successful Kickstarter developers, Brian Fargo, the Obsidian Group. It seems across the board, the reason they're successful, it seems, is their strong dedication to making sure fans are also involved in the development cycle. You mentioned one way of the people who are able to contribute and have access to that alpha, as you call it, and you'll analyze it and actually work. What about other avenues that you're making sure that it isn't just sort of a vending machine where you drop in your funding and you wait a little while and maybe you say 1 or 2, ideas amidst thousands? What are you doing to make sure that each individual contributor really feels like they're right there beside you and you're listening to them? It's a difficult task, but I think it's one that kind of
It is a difficult task, but It is a difficult task, but today we're so connected.
Mm-hmm.
We're so connected because of the digital space, because of things like Twitter and Facebook and the ability to post on board. So if you look on Kickstarter, one of the things that you can do is post your feedback and then your comments, and we have someone at 22 Cans whose job it is to go through those posts every single day and to bring 3 or 4 of those posts to our attention in design, and then we will look at those, analyze those on a daily basis,
Mm-hmm.
And then produce a video giving feedback about those points. And I really think that we're going to do that every day to the end of the campaign, and then we're going to do it weekly throughout development.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, good designers really steal ideas. That's the truth of the matter.
Yeah.
And if someone in the community has a great idea, wouldn't it be fantastic to nurture that idea, bring it in there, comment on it, give feedback on it, and have that turnaround be extremely fast. So if someone posts tomorrow, you might well find the next day I would comment on that in a video. That's a very tangible way of doing it. Almost the opposite of that, but just as important, is something called analytics. And this is not quite as personal, but it's very important when you're crafting a game. Because when we release the prototype, which will be in January, built into the prototype is this analytical engine, which is analyzing what you're doing, analyzing when your little people die, analyzing when you're using God powers, analyzing how often you go into the story mode. And we take the data from those analytics and refine the game around those analytics. So this whole idea of getting feedback from the community, both on the very personal level of commenting on someone's individual post, and on a more generalistic level, as in looking at masses of people's play style, is built into the design from the ground up. So that's one of the really strong reasons that we use Kickstarter, and we really thought about how we were going to take that feedback and use it. Because as you say, it's very easy to say to someone, well, we'll listen to what you say, but how do you listen? And so we've got an actual process in there. I think as well, for anybody who signs up to Kickstarter, I think they will have an incredible insight into how a game's made. It's because of this feedback, because we're releasing all the iterations of the design document, by PDF. We release all the iterations of it so you can see the game evolve. We're releasing prototypes incredibly early so that we can get that feedback early on. I think you get an amazing insight into how a game is made. Mm-hmm. If you really want to learn, right, I'm fascinated, I'd love to be a designer, then I think looking at something like Project Godus would be a good start in that.
Off the top of your head, I don't want to put you on the spot, but have there been instances that you can identify where someone has suggested something that you really haven't considered that now is going through the process of being implemented and developed in your Project Godus? I know that's always kind of the dream of people when they are a part of these sort of things. Have there been examples like that?
Yes, there very much has. I mean, so a lot of the feedback has been people commenting on things that they didn't like or did like about the 3 games that we're using and combining together. That's Populous, Dungeon Keeper, and Black and White. Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of feedback about, what, if you had done it this way, there's a very good example of this, is that someone said, I really hated the fact in Populous that, and we had thought of this, is that flat land, because when you're spreading the people out, it's important you give them land to build farms on. That meant that the landscape got very flat, because flat land was most efficient. And because of that, we introduced this concept where the higher up a little town is, the more bonuses it gets. And just because of that feedback, it meant that then now the towns and the villages and the followers spread out over the hills in a very delightful way. And we hadn't really thought of that. We had like, had said, well, we'll just have it on as flat land. So that, is a specific example, and we are listening to those feedback. And of course, when at the end of the day, when we get this prototype out into people's hands and they get to play it, that's when that feedback gets most exciting.
It's a very, very exciting process. Very excited to get and be a part of this particular game. Speaking more of the industry and kind of a comment on Kickstarter in general, because more and more games are choosing alternates like this to become developed, where do you, as someone who's been a part of the industry for so long, see it going? And do you think players should be perhaps a little reticent or be looking forward for what's to come?
Well, I think the Kickstarter is not for everybody. I mean,
absolutely.
I think Kickstarter is a fantastic thing for people who are interested in the process of development, who are fascinated of seeing an idea grow and blossom. And that means that, not everybody wants to put their money down, and wait months and months for a game to come out. So it's very, very suitable for small development teams rather than very large development teams. Large development teams, of course, require an awful lot of money. And what small development teams are able to do is be very nimble and quick. And in that respect, Kickstarter is absolutely perfect. It's another one of those examples where we couldn't ever have really imagined something like Kickstarter before we had this socially connected world that we have today. And it's an example of how empowering that is, because what Kickstarter is doing is enabling a number of smaller projects, like, for example, Godus is a smaller project, to have life and have an existence outside of the normal publisher funding route, because normally publishers fund development, and a lot of publishers, not all, but a lot of publishers will focus on the tried and tested formulas of games.
Games that have a 3 or a 4 at the end, sort of thing.
Yes, that's right. And of course you can't blame them for that.
Absolutely, yeah.
But if I think if you asked anybody in the world, do you want a breath of fresh air or an innovation in gaming, most people would say yes. But innovation is risky. It's risky because it's very hard to do a financial model behind a genre or a game that hasn't existed before, and that meant that the publishers' models tended to squeeze a little bit of innovation out of the industry, and that's where Kickstarter really delightfully comes in for me, is the idea that you can say brave things. I mean, I'm sure if I went to a publisher and said, look, I want to do a God game, they'd probably turn around and say, well, God games, they're not really as popular as they were a few years ago, and it might be a struggle to get that funding. So Kickstarter is wonderfully enabling. It's great to see something like that come up, especially for innovation projects.
Again, absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much, Peter, for taking the time to talk to us. Peter Molyneux here to talk about Godus. Thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.